Hello, and welcome to the Deconstructing Data podcast. I'm Jessie, Lizak, CMO at BDEX, along with co-host Joshua Morgan, customer advocate at Drift, and of course, David Finkelstein, BDEX's co-founder and CEO. Today's guest is Loury, president of CAUSE+EFFECT Strategy. John, you spent more than 15 years using data to develop growth strategies for both regional and national organizations while serving in a variety of leadership roles, and currently as president of CE Strategy. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
So yeah, John, we're really happy to have you on the show today. Great to meet you. And maybe you can tell us a little bit of your backstory, how you got to where you are today, and love to hear a little more about cause and effect strategy and what you're doing there.
Thank you. Well, I actually have a kind of an entangled, marketing story. I came up in direct marketing, then worked at traditional agencies in both Rochester, New York, Buffalo, New York, and Las Vegas. And the, my last stop before, founding Cause and Effect was actually at a traditional ad agency, and was given the role of trying to build out what their data services and data consulting and analytics business would be. And I took the time to put together that plan, people, process, technology, and submitted that to the leadership team. And although it was got some compliments on the plan, wasn't quite the right time for that agency to invest in data. And basically took that plan and eventually spun that out about a year later into a standalone business and found some angel funding and got after it. A couple of guys with some fold-out tables and a couple of laptops, both myself, a gentleman named Michael Sutton, and our angel investor, Eric Weber. And we thought that we would be bringing, marketing intelligence to SMBs. And it was definitely a harder road to hoe than we had originally planned, and there were some pivots along the way, and including an Adweek fastest growing agencies in the world award, and a move towards more enterprise analytics than specifically focusing on the marketing side, and really was able to tap into a lot of the growth and excitement around data and insight and becoming data driven for the enterprise.
That's really awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for being here. And, you mentioned a little bit already about, people, process, and technology. So that kind of gets us into our first topic, which is evolving data culture. So could you talk to us about how the people, process, and technology to use data and make decisions is evolving?
Yeah, I would say that, the technology is at an amazing place right now. There are so many different tools and technologies on the market that I feel like the technology, the toolkit has outpaced our people and process. And I think if you see a lot of the research on companies struggling to become data driven, it's not technology that's the major problem. It is that that word culture, and you think about people and process, especially related to culture. People, we have an iPhone in our hand that can do the amount of processing and computing that 50 years ago the fastest supercomputers could do. So it's a question of how do we integrate that into people's daily decision making, and it's not a question of technology. It's how do we, in many cases, slow down to speed up, and how do we build some process around how we want to use data, how we want to scale data, and really make more informed decisions.
Yeah,
I think that's a great point. I see it all the time. There's so many tools, as you mentioned, out there that everybody kind of gets caught up in the tools, and sometimes the data that comes out of them, but never really put in a process to say, okay, how are we going to use this data?
Or how about who's even going to own the tool, or what is the action team that's going to help support it? If you don't have a strong business stakeholder or a strong use case, things fizzle out after a while. Executive sponsorship is another thing that we could talk about, why a lot of data or analytics initiatives don't go or achieve what we had hoped.
Mm-hmm.
In our first few years in business, especially focusing on the marketing side, we had built amazing dashboards for clients that had a lot of nuggets of intelligence. And quite frankly, they accepted the deliverables and then they kind of went away. And it was, why is it happening? Well, it's because you also need to have some wraparound consulting that's attached to those things. You can't just give somebody a tool and expect that they're going to do it on their own. And that's where I think we've really accelerated our growth, is not only the services around the analytics, the final deliverables, the pretty and sexy stuff. It's what about all of the hard work and all of the plumbing, all of the not so sexy stuff that kind of gets a little more technical than people, want to understand. And we use the term plumbing. Everybody wants to be an interior designer. Everyone wants to, focus on, couches and pictures and paintings, but nobody wants to know what the plumber's doing. They just expect those things to work. And by focusing on the plumbing and then also focusing on what happens after deliverables have been given, doing some consulting on how clients should actually use and adopt data and these analytics deliverables, we've found a tremendous amount of success.
Do you feel that it's because there's a lot of people that strive for just the sheer amount of data rather than that usable data?
I agree that there is some allure to talking using the phrase big data. Well, a lot of the research that I've read is that the bigger data gets, the easier it is to find trends in it. So we don't actually need to analyze all the data. As if we take random samples of the data, we often get the same results as we would if we analyzed the entire data set. So I don't think the focus should be on making sure that we have this, incredibly all-encompassing data set. At some points, it's better to start small and scale up.
Great points.
Yeah, and I think that to your point previous to that, it's sometimes you got to go backwards, right? You have to start with what's the end goal, right? Because a lot of times people just kind of start with the data and say, okay, well, now what can I do with it? And okay, here's a tool I can use to collect it, and here's a tool I can use to, do something with it. But if they don't have sort of a measurement of what success is, then you never get there, right? And so
Absolutely.
To your point, someone makes an investment in something and some data initiative, but they may not end up ever really doing anything with it because they didn't really have sort of that goal. What does success look like in using the data?
We were guilty of that ourselves when we first 3 months of Cause and Effect, which we're going to celebrate 8 years in business in January, which we're really excited about, and moving to an office in downtown Rochester. We've been in a suburb for the last 8 years. Moving downtown is something we're very excited about. But those first 6 months in business, we started evaluating BI tools, because what was going to be our tool to present, all of this, aggregated marketing data. And, we're guilty of it. I thought we just bought a tool and then everything, kind of happened automatically. Boy, was I wrong.
Yeah.
The amount of time that needed to be spent on data architecture and data modeling is oftentimes either underestimated or completely left out of the equation. So we work with a lot of BI tools. We work directly with them and are oftentimes implementation partners with those tools and technologies. And what starts as a BI project oftentimes becomes either a business case project, understanding what the true goal, the business goals and requirements are, because those aren't always well thought out. It's, oh my gosh, let's rush to the technology. Or it becomes a data architecture or data integration project, because those are the initial building blocks that we need to create a good foundation to eventually turn into a BI, an analytics, an advanced analytics project.
All good stuff.
So yeah, those are really good points that actually bring us into the next topic, right, Jessie?
Yes, they do. I was just going to mention really quick, just kind of high level with data culture, a few thoughts. So, in terms of data culture, I think it's really important that, of course, kind of summing up everything you guys were saying, but at a higher level, is to teach and promote data best practices across the business, right? And then setting one goal to get everybody motivated around that one goal to create that culture, and where they should be storing things, and when and who deletes data, and, how to, ensure it's always accessible to the people who need it. So those were just some of the notes I took, and I thought I would reflect on those for the audience. But yeah, are you ready to move into the next topic?
Certainly.
Yes.
And I think we sort of touched upon it, and it's about the critical role that adoption plays in incorporating data in making business decisions, right? And so, like we said already, like, how do you make that business decision? You have to decide what is the goal, what is the purpose, why are we doing this exercise, and how do we get there? What tools do we need to do, and how do we get adoption across, company wide to get there? And so, I'd love to hear, from your experience, because it sounds like that's what you're doing, consulting with companies and sort of helping them make those business decisions.
Yes, it is. And we bring a very, I say, a matter of fact type of consulting to the table. We don't like to overcomplicate things with vocabulary. It really starts out with, what is the business case? And said even more simply, what decisions do you or your team need to make that you think having more or better data would be beneficial? And we literally work back from that very simplistic concept of, what do people need data to help them solve? And so many things work backwards from there. You start with this business goal or these decision-making capabilities, and then that leads to data sources. And then that leads to, okay, how do we integrate these data sources, and where does this data sit? It isn't until, we'll say in the red zone, for a football analogy, that we start talking about how to actually visualize that data. That is the last piece, is, playing with pie charts and graphs and, colors, because, you talk about having a tool. If you were to use a hammer, and every time you go to use that hammer, the base of the hammer breaks off, you're going to use that hammer maybe twice. The first time because it was a surprise, and the second time is, okay, this is a broken hammer. So when it comes to, using data to make decisions, if that data isn't accurate and if it isn't up to date, you won't use it as a tool. And again, it goes back to these more fundamental pieces of the puzzle, before we actually get to the insight piece. And, this concept of drip is something that I share with clients. So is anybody familiar with drip?
No, share that. I'd love to hear.
Or like drip the software?
No, it's a an analytics term. So data rich, insight poor.
Oh, okay. Like an acronym.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so that's where a lot of companies start, is this data rich, insight poor. And today we're finally getting to a point where it's not that. We have so many insights that we need to simplify things. So I apologize for that.
No worries.
No worries.
It's really trying to figure out where people are in that continuum. Are you in the drip phase? Are you in the, okay, I have dashboards on dashboards, or I have, a dashboard with, 25 widgets in it, and talking about how to really simplify things. What do we need? What will, having indicators today is really big. Scorecards are really big today, and kind of leading indicators are big today. How can I go to this platform and look at this analytics, and immediately it's inherent, what is trending upward or downward? Like, don't make me dig for it. Like, just give me what I need so I can get along with my day, because of the, 5 other platforms that I have to use, whether it be for, HR and keeping time, or, putting in my expenses, or, posting on LinkedIn. So it really is about simplicity, is another one of these huge keys in adoption.
Well, and I think something we don't see talked about too much is the integrity of the person that is interpreting that data. Because I know, like, if I think back to my roots in education, I can make the data depending on what I want those parameters to look like. I can make it reflect anything that I want it to. So if an administrator walks in and go, how are your kids meeting the KPIs? Depending on how I've set those parameters, I can go, oh, look at all these, like, benefits and how much we've increased our scores and stuff. When, I may not be coming from a place of integrity, but just telling you what you want to hear.
Definitely. Standardization is really important. Coming up with what those roles are and what those formulas are to make up those KPIs is, again, part of that, foundational layer of business intelligence and analytics that, again, it's not sexy, but if that's not in place, it really renders the rest, either inaccurate or at times unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love for you to give us an example, sort of a use case, and, you can leave out the company name, but I'd love to hear an example of use case where you sort of built out, the infrastructure that we're talking about. A company came and said, hey, this is what we're trying to do. And this is how we got there. I think that would be really interesting for our listeners to try to get an idea of, what's involved in this process.
Sure. There are a couple of stories that, are in the news, so I can share them. One of them would be PGA of America. They 2 years ago, they had a senior event. That's a good one. They had a senior event here in Rochester, specifically, and we helped them to understand, what the market of Rochester was, where pockets of potential additional ticket sales could be, and they had a new sponsorship with a KitchenAid, so products company, and how could we integrate all of that in to create an amazing experience for people visiting the event, and to continue to grow their ticket sales. So one of the things that we first started with was all of their historical ticket sales for the last decade. So that was a data set in itself. Mm-hmm. Another piece of data that we had used was, geofencing. So we geofenced some events in the area that could be considered complementary to create some new audiences. We then did an analysis of tax information to find those pockets of individuals that had either some similar incomes or their zip codes had similar demographic makeup. And we aggregated all of that data together, visualized it, and then helped them make decisions for their marketing plan. And we executed none of that marketing plan. We worked with the client and handed it off to the agency to then execute. But, there was an understanding for us, the net result was the highest ticket selling senior PGA golf event in its history, the most attended. There was a few more tickets sold at a previous event, but that was because they tied Ryder Cup, the ability to purchase Ryder Cup tickets if you bought these tickets. So that was an unfair advantage. Mm-hmm. But the most attended senior PGA event in history. Using data to help find those pockets of individuals, a senior PGA event doesn't have a tremendous amount of marketing budget. They're not buying TV ads. So a lot of the tactics are digital. But being able to help them understand, like audiences in pockets of New York State that I didn't even know the names of these areas in New York State, and I live in New York State. Mm-hmm. But to be able to help uncover those was critical. And the other piece was understanding that looking at some of the psychographics and demographics of their existing ticket buyers, they heavily skewed towards wine connoisseurs and foodies. And, Rochester in general and upstate New York has the Finger Lakes. So it's kind of inherent that wine and food are, part of our culture up here. And we actually suggested, based on the data, because of how heavily the audience is skewed, that they create some digital ads that didn't include golf, and that had never been done before.
Mm-hmm.
So you're seeing ads really promoting the KitchenAid concept and the programming around KitchenAid. And the only presence of golf in the digital ads was the logo of the golf tournament. And this led to tremendous success amongst millennials coming to a senior PGA event. So this is not Tiger Woods. These are golfers, that could be 50 plus, and really coming out to do kitchen activations with chefs, and drinking craft beer and walking the golf course and having a blast. I was at the event, and it took everything in me not to walk up to pockets of 20-something-year-olds drinking craft beer and ask them, how did you hear about this? Why are you here? And I knew the answer, so I held back, but it was just amazing to see this whole new market come out. And it was because we looked at the data, it made sense, we tested some things out, it worked, so we did a whole heck of a lot more of it, and it really paid off. And it's credit to the PGA and Brian Carnes, who was the PGA tour director at that event, who was interested in doing something a little bit different, and the results were tremendous.
That's an awesome example of how you were able to take those different data sets and really use them to generate the outcomes that they were looking for. That's perfect. That's awesome.
That reminds me of, and I don't know if anybody's familiar with like the old animal marketing for like weightlifting and stuff back in like the early 2000s. But we went from like, you had all these men's fitness models and they were advertising supplements and things like that, and all of a sudden this company Animal, they come out with this guy that is just like, he's huge, he's in this like dungeon basement gym, and there's like no advertising, and it just says, it's saying stuff like, bring your will to the floor and things like that. And it caused people like this, like this brand new marketing concept where people, like, it wasn't pretty, it wasn't flashy, it was advertising for that hard work and determination you were putting in. There was no products or anything like that. And so it was and it caught the attention of so many people. And the only thing that you saw from the marketing with the kind of like with the PGA was like little animal insignia at the very top. And it just like, everybody's like, what is this? What is going on? I got to check this out.
That's cool.
That's funny. Well, should we move into the third topic, Josh?
Let's do it.
All right. You want to introduce it?
All right. So tech stack. What's your top favorite 5 in your tech stack?
Okay. Well, I gotta say, we're a big fan of data visualization tools. So it's not really kind of fair to pick one in particular, but we have great relationships with the people over at Sisense and Google's people over at Looker and Power BI and a little bit of Tableau. So there's a few on the BI side. On the CDW side, Snowflake. We're a big fan of Snowflake and what they are doing to really democratize data, to create a standard and a playground for everybody to be able to share data in a safe and secure way. And it has been really eye-opening for a lot of the companies that we have worked with, that we've brought the solution to, which isn't to say that some of the other competitive products from GCP and Amazon aren't valid too. But if you're telling me I got to pick my favorites, Snowflake right now is really big, along with Sisense as well.
Sisense, okay.
And I think that Snowflake being as secured as, I think it's hugely important. And a plug for BDEX here, where safety and security is really paramount with BDEX, which is why it gets a lot of love from people. But I think we've seen so like many the breaches and things like that I think that security is becoming more and more paramount in those buying decisions.
I totally agree. I mean, that security piece is critical, and nobody wants to be a first mover. So the fact that Snowflake has some really strong case studies with some of the largest brands in the world, everybody from Disney to, you know, different grocers and financial services companies. The concept of, say, I know Disney and ESPN have merged, but the concept that, you know, the unit at ESPN and the unit at Disney can do a cross promotion and do it in a safe and ethical way from a data perspective is just awesome. It means if they can do it, then sure, enterprise and medium-sized businesses can figure out a way to do it. The fact that your data never has to leave its physical, or we'll say metaphysical location, and you can still share aspects of that data with someone else or another entity and never give up any of that PIA piece to that it's just awesome. And from a marketing standpoint, it's part of what we've always wanted to have is how do I take the relevant attributes from your data set and the relevant attributes from my data set and come together to create this, this winning strategy. And when I say winning strategy, I mean not something that looks pretty, but something that gets the results that we're all dreaming of.
Absolutely. Well, BDEX is proud partners of Snowflake, so give a
Awesome.
little bit there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But thanks for sharing some of your favorite tools in your tech stack. So I wrote down Sisense and Snowflake and tagged them in the post.
Okay, awesome.
Thanks.
Our friends at both places, I'm sure will love that.
Awesome. Well, should we move into that last topic on the news article?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting actually because it ties into the whole data sharing concept. So, Google, there's been a lot of talk about obviously the cookieless solutions, and there's a recent article in Adweek about their seller-defined audiences, and I thought that was pretty interesting. It's about enabling publishers to basically take their first-party audience and essentially share it by way of Google with advertisers for targeting. It's interesting in some ways, has me a little scared in other ways, because I kind of feel like there's a lot of opportunity for those, publishers that are, sort of not on the up and up to take advantage of this and build audiences that are fraudulent. And so I think that that's something we're always on the lookout for. We do a lot with respect to identifying fraudulent data that's typically linked to ad fraud and things like that, which there's a lot of, as you know. So I'm interested to hear if you know anything about this new technology coming out, your thoughts on that, whether you see that as a risk or whether you see the reward is bigger than the risk there.
Well, I don't necessarily see it as a step in the right direction. Tech has gotten together at times in the past to come up with universal standards for one thing or another. And I think it's about time that some of these, larger providers get together, Google included, and come up with a universal standard. I mean, there are things that exist out there and ways to do this so that we can make it ethical, we can make it scalable and repeatable, but kind of continuing to create these, rabbit holes that pigeon clients into, one tech or another, that doesn't show evolution and growth. That shows that it's still kind of a money grab, and it's a new way for somebody to own a piece of the space, at the customer's peril.
That's an excellent point. I agree 100%. And, I've been saying for 2 years now that, I think 2 years ago, there was probably a dozen different identity solutions. Now there's 250, probably, maybe more. And everybody, created their identity saying this is going to be the next identity, solution that's going to be global. But none of that is true. It's all marketing fluff to try to gain some of the market share and not lose all the opportunity. But I think you're right. There is no true standard. Like cookies became a standard, right? I mean, every browser adopted cookies, and that became a standard.
Right.
And so I think you're right. There needs to be some standardized third-party cookie replacement. And Google is using this to say, okay, well, maybe we can grab up an opportunity here and grab up a lot of the, the revenue opportunity there. But I think similar to so many other the solutions that are out there, they're just a bunch of scattered solutions, and nothing is getting standardized. So
and you look at a lot of the growth from OTA, that is an emerging market. You know what I mean? So how are you going to force, somebody to kind of learn this new way of business, but yet, Hulu hasn't embraced it, or, it just, we're going to continue to see people spin their wheels. And obviously Google has put off, this transition now, what, 2 or 3 times?
Yeah.
I think this might be the 3rd time, because they know, I mean, there are a lot of times out there, whether it be tools that SAP has developed, for business intelligence, which, they say that they're sunsetting something, and marketing and PR did a great job of coming up with this campaign around sunsetting this tool or technology. And, then the market has other plans. And, Google's obviously one of the biggest tech companies in the world, but, their revenue is tied up in these advertisers. And if the advertisers kind of gang together and push back, I think this is why you see these delays.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And there is no, there's no sort of open source solution here yet that works cross-platform. And that's ultimately what needs to happen.
Awesome. Well, we've gotten through all 4 topics and we still have a few minutes. Josh, what do you think? Should we get into some of our questions?
All right, John, this is kind of a tech stack, non-tech stack. What are your 5 favorite pieces of, technology, whether it be like PlayStation, whether it be, like a camera, whether it be your TV? What's your favorite 5?
Okay. I'm trying to think of what, has what pulls me on a day-to-day basis. Well, I would have to say one of the new ones for me is Eero, Mesh Internet by Amazon. So we have it fully integrated in our home, and it is a blast to be able to know what devices are on your network and not on your network, how much data they're consuming, how fast the internet is going at any given time. It's a whole lot of, from my perspective, cool, maybe my wife's perspective, junk data that, I get to see and understand on a daily basis. I would say Ring for sure is something that I also have been enjoying, kind of like letting that sort of not take over my life, but definitely become integrated in my life, because, not only do we have some, cameras on the doorbell and cameras above the garage and in the backyard, but then some really cool stuff like the thermostat, and having that wired into, one interface that I get to look at and be able to control and make decisions on. So the camera piece is obviously what, put them on the map. But this whole integrated smart home piece is the greater play that, I've kind of slowly been allowing that to become integrated in my life.
I want to chime in on the camera thing, because I have a few cameras in my yard, and I live kind of on a I don't know, it's part of a preserve. So there's a lot of wildlife. And so I've gotten bobcats and coyotes, and I have a gopher tortoise, which is probably about this big, that lives on I have a few of them that live on my property, and I put one right in front of the tortoise burrow, and I can see him coming and going all the time. And it's pretty funny to watch this thing come and go. So a lot of wildlife that we get on those cameras too.
That's awesome.
It's entertaining.
And I'm really enjoying, they're not just cameras anymore. The AI that they have installed to be able to understand, the data that's coming through, to be able to distinguish an animal versus a human. There's a selection now that, you can click and it prioritizes like, human beings versus, what it would consider noise. So, really enjoying kind of discovering that stuff and trying to, tweak it and fine tune it. I'm going to throw you off with another technology, which, is it a technology? Is it not? But Yeti. My wife says that we're a Yeti family. And I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, well, how many different Yeti products do we own? Well, probably 5 or 6 different Yeti products. And if those things just didn't work so darn good, I wouldn't keep buying them. But to be able to, just went to the Bills game on Monday night. Go Bills. And I packed a small cooler the night before, and with one little ice pack and some cheese, some crackers, a few beers, and it was awesome. It was like it never left the refrigerator, and it was more than 24 hours. No, just about 24 hours it had been in that little mini cooler.
Yeah,
granted, the stuff is pretty expensive, but it literally works. And so many things in life, we all come from a marketing background on this call, so it isn't a guarantee that things work as advertised. So when you do, whether it be a consulting firm like Cause and Effect Strategy or a technology like Yeti, when things work the way they're supposed to, or they make a promise and they actually deliver, I don't mind paying for those things and occasionally paying a little bit more than you would want to pay.
I hadn't even thought of a Yeti as technology, but you're right. I made some ice water last night. In fact, I use the Yeti for everything, coffee and everything. Made some ice water last night. Fell asleep when I got up this morning to go put coffee in it. It still had ice water in it. I was like, what is this sorcery?
So I'm trying to think if there are any other ones. I mean, the iPhone is kind of an obvious one. I don't want to use that one. I'm trying to think what other technologies I have. Just purchased a new vehicle and was really inundated with the technology of this vehicle. Just even changing gears in the car was totally different for me. I've been previously driving a car that was a 2014, and now having a 2023 has really just changed it. I mean, in the LCD, in the screen, my heads up screen is my car in the color that my car is.
Yeah.
And just all the intuitiveness of the vehicle, it's crazy. And I'm still trying to learn all of the different pieces of tech that this car has, which, is crazy in itself, because you look at different car segments, the crossover SUV segment is extremely competitive. And then you look at, pickup trucks, whereas it's competitive, but there isn't a lot of options. So it's almost like you kind of have to take what you get, even if there is a truck that's available. Because my partner, one of our partners, Mike, and I both bought a car that was the same price. But the technology that's packed in my car versus the technology in his car is completely different. And it's really interesting, like, supply and demand, how that plays a role, and, what you can get away with from a marketing perspective when, the demand outpaces supply, on the pickup truck side.
That's all good stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And in closing, we would love to hear from listeners. So if anyone's listening, please send us any and all feedback to info@bdex.com. As I always say, share your qualitative data with us so we can make this better for you. But thanks for listening in, and thank you so much for joining us, John.
Thank you very much for having me. It was great to meet all of you, and I really appreciate a bunch of like-minded individuals helping to make the world a little bit more data-driven too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks, John. And I'll give you a ring next time I'm in Rochester.
I hope so. Please do.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.